want you to do something for me right now. Think about the last time you were completely alone in your house at night. Maybe you were watching something on your phone. Maybe you were about to fall asleep. And then you heard it. A sound from another room. A creak, a shift. Something that your brain immediately tried to explain away. The wind, the house settling, a neighbor. But for just one fraction of a second, before logic kicked in, something ancient inside you whispered a different answer. That instinct, that cold electric fear that shoots up your spine before your rational mind can stop it, that is not weakness. That is memory. Ancient, inherited memory, passed down through thousands of years of human evolution. Because for most of human history, we knew something shared the darkness with us. It didn't matter if you were born in New York or Nairobi, London or Lahore, Tokyo or Tehran. Every culture, every civilization, every ancient text ever written by human hands carries the same warning in 1,000 different languages under 1,000 different names. There are things that live beside us that we cannot see. In the West, you called them demons, shadow people, poltergeists, doppelgangers. In the East, thousands of years before those words even existed, they had already mapped this invisible world in extraordinary detail. They had named them, classified them, documented their behaviors, their habitats, their methods. And they called them the Jinn. 7 distinct species, 7 categories of entity that have existed on this planet longer than the human race itself. 7 kings of a world built not from earth and water, but from smokeless fire. Tonight, on Miles with Dreams, we are going to meet all 7 of them. And by the time we reach the end of this hour, you will understand, with absolute bone-deep certainty, that you have never been alone. Not once. Not ever. Before we meet the 7, we need to understand what they are. Because the Jinn are not ghosts. They are not the spirits of dead humans haunting old houses. They are something fundamentally different. Something that predates us. According to ancient Islamic scripture, the Quran, one of the most widely read texts in human history, the universe was created in a specific order. Angels came first, beings of pure light created to serve. Then came the Jinn, beings of smokeless fire, created thousands of years before the first human being drew breath. They are a parallel civilization. Let that land for a moment. Not monsters in the conventional sense, not mindless creatures that lurk in the dark. A civilization, with families, with societies, with their own religions, their own politics, their own wars. They have the good and the evil just as we do. They have the wise and the foolish, the peaceful and the violent. They fall in love, they raise children, they die. The difference between them and us? They are made of fire, and they can move through our world invisibly, like a current through water. For most of history, the two civilizations, humanity and the Jinn, maintained an uneasy coexistence, mostly invisible to each other, mostly separate. But sometimes, the borders between the two worlds blur, and when they do, extraordinary things happen. The most famous account of human-Jinn interaction comes from the story of King Solomon, or as he is known in Arabic, Suleiman. According to ancient scripture, Solomon was given a gift that no human before or since has ever possessed, the ability to command the Jinn. With this power, he directed armies of Jinn to construct palaces of breathtaking scale, fortresses that no human engineering of the time could explain, structures built overnight on a scale so massive that later generations would look upon the ruins and declare them impossible, built by human hands.
They were not. But Solomon's power died with him, and when it did, the Jinn scattered back into the hidden corners of the world, into the deserts, into the deep oceans, into the dark spaces between walls, into the shadows at the foot of your bed. There are 7 primary types, and each one has a very specific territory. Let us begin.
The Jann. They are the first, the oldest, the original Jinn, the first generation born of smokeless fire, before the others branched off and evolved into something else entirely. If you imagine the Jinn as a family tree, the Jann are the roots. They live in the wild places, the desolate spaces, the environments that human beings have learned over millennia of instinct to fear and avoid. Vast deserts, barren mountains, waterless plains where the horizon stretches for 100 miles and nothing moves. Nothing that you can see. The Jann are shapeshifters, but unlike some of the others we will meet tonight, they tend to favor elemental forms. Their signature transformation is one that anyone who has spent time in the desert will immediately recognize. The sandstorm. Not just any sandstorm. Those sudden, violent columns of spinning sand and wind that appear with no meteorological warning, that rise from the flat desert floor like a living thing, traveling in directions that defy the prevailing wind, that arrive, devastate, and disappear in minutes, leaving nothing behind. Ancient desert travelers had a name for these specific formations. They called them Jinn winds, and they believed, with the certainty of people who had watched companions disappear into those columns and never return, that these were not weather events. They were the Jann traveling. Here is what you need to understand about the Jann. They are not inherently hostile to humans. In the vast wilderness of the world, they have their own paths, their own routes, their own territories. The danger comes from intrusion. Cross into their territory uninvited, and you will discover that the desert nomad, the Jann, responds to trespass exactly the way any territorial creature does, with overwhelming, catastrophic force. There are accounts from Bedouin traders stretching back thousands of years of entire caravans that entered certain desert passages and simply ceased to exist. No bodies recovered, no tracks beyond a certain point, just an abrupt, absolute absence where 50 people and their camels had been walking moments before. The Jann are the wilderness itself. They are the reason that every culture on Earth, without exception, has a deep, primal fear of the open, desolate spaces. That inexplicable dread you feel when the landscape becomes too vast, too empty, too silent. That is an ancient warning, encoded into your DNA by 10,000 years of ancestors who learned the hard way that the desert is already occupied. Now we move from the wild to somewhere much closer to home. Literally. The Amir, pronounced Amir, are the second classification of Jinn, and their name, translated from ancient Arabic, means something that should make you deeply uncomfortable. It means companion. The Amir are cohabitants. Unlike the Jann, who belong to the wilderness, the Amir have always been drawn to human settlements, to villages and cities and houses, to the spaces where people live, eat, argue, love, and sleep. They live in the walls of old buildings, in the shadows beneath staircases, in the corners of rooms where the light never quite reaches, and in houses where multiple generations of families have lived. where decades of human emotion have soaked into the very wood and stone. They gather, sometimes in significant numbers. Now, before your pulse spikes completely out of control, here is the slightly reassuring part. The Amir are not, by default, malevolent. They do not, as a rule, want to harm you. What they want is entertainment. Think about that from their perspective. You are an ancient, invisible entity. You have been living in this house since before the current family moved in. You have watched 3 generations of human beings go through the complete theater of their lives within these walls. Weddings and funerals, first steps and last breaths, arguments and reconciliations, joy and grief, and everything between. And humans, seen from that angle, are fascinating. The Amir interact with the physical world in small, specific ways, the kinds of ways that the paranormal investigation community in the West has been documenting for decades under the term poltergeist activity. Objects moved, keys placed on the kitchen counter found 20 minutes later in a coat pocket you haven't touched in weeks. Doors in empty rooms found open when you were certain you closed them. Lights that flicker at odd moments. Small, specific, impossible to explain disruptions to the order of your physical environment. And here is what is most unsettling about the Amir. They can hear you. When you talk to yourself, when you mutter under your breath while you cook, when you have a one-sided argument with no one, when you sit in an empty room and speak your thoughts out loud because the silence is too heavy to bear. They hear every word, and according to ancient texts, they find it hilarious. I want you to think about that the next time you find yourself talking to yourself in your kitchen at midnight. There is a very real possibility that you are not having a monologue. You are having a conversation. You just cannot hear the other half of it. We need to stop. Because what I am about to tell you is categorically different from anything that has come before in this story. The Jann are in the desert. You can avoid deserts. The Amir are in houses. You can, theoretically, move. But the Qareen, pronounced Qareen, you cannot escape. Because the Qareen is not in your house. It is in you. According to ancient scripture, confirmed across multiple religious and cultural traditions, every single human being that has ever lived has been assigned, at the moment of their birth, a personal Jinn, a Qareen, a shadow self, a doppelganger made of smokeless fire, tethered to your soul from your very first breath. It is born when you are born. It grows as you grow. It ages as you age. It dies when you die. And in the 70, 80, 90 years of your life on this earth, it never leaves your side. Not once. Not for a single second. Not when you are with other people. Not when you are asleep. Not even in the places where you believe, truly, absolutely believe, that you are completely alone. The Qareen knows you in a way that no other being in the universe does. Not your parents, not your closest friend, not your therapist or your partner. The Qareen knows your thoughts before you think them, your desires before you feel them, your fears before you name them. Every shameful thought you have ever had, every secret you have kept from everyone you love, every dark fantasy, every buried impulse, every moment of weakness you have never spoken aloud. Your Qareen has been there for every single one. And here is the truly terrifying part. That voice in your head, that intrusive thought that arrives without invitation, the sudden urge to do something destructive, something irrational, something that does not feel like you at all. Ancient wisdom says that voice is not you. That is your Qareen, whispering. Let me tell you about something that happened, a real account passed down through generations. A man was living alone in a city apartment. It was 3 a.m. He could not sleep, which, as we have already established, may not have been entirely his own idea. He went to his bathroom to wash his face. He stood at the sink, water running over his hands, eyes closed. And over the sound of the running water from the hallway behind him, he heard his name called. In his own voice. He turned around. The hallway was empty. He stood there for a moment, trying to convince himself it was a dream, a trick of the acoustics. Then he turned back to the mirror. His reflection was smiling. Not a small smile, a wide, deliberate, knowing smile. The kind of smile that says, "I have been waiting for you to notice me." The man had not moved his lips. His face was still, frozen in shock. But the reflection's mouth opened, and in his own voice, from his own face, it spoke 4 words. "Who said you were alone?" He left the apartment that night, left everything, walked into the street at 3 a.m. with nothing but his keys. And the truly horrible thing? The Qareen came with him. It always does. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Have you ever heard your own name called, in your own voice, when no one was there? Have you ever looked in a mirror for just a fraction too long and felt that the face looking back at you was thinking something different than you were? That is not your imagination. That is your Qareen, reminding you that you have never, not once in your entire life, been alone with your own thoughts. The word ghoul is everywhere in Western popular culture. Horror movies, Halloween costumes, video games, comic books. The word has been so thoroughly absorbed into modern entertainment that most people hear it and think, fictional monster, not particularly scary. I need you to unlearn that association right now. Because the ghoul, the original, ancient, documented ghoul of Eastern tradition, is not a movie monster. It is a hunter, a predator of extraordinary sophistication, and the reason that every culture on Earth has a deep, visceral warning against wandering alone at night, particularly near places of death. Ghouls are shapeshifters, but they operate very differently from the Jann. Where the Jann favor vast, elemental forms, the ghoul is a mimic, a predator that wears beauty like a lure, like a deep-sea fish that dangles light in the darkness to draw prey close. Their preferred hunting ground is the borderlands, the in-between spaces, graveyards, deserts, the edges of battlefields, anywhere that the boundary between life and death has worn thin. And their preferred bait is you. Here is a story that is over 1,000 years old, but I need you to hear it the way it was originally told, not as folklore, but as a warning. A merchant was crossing a desert at night, alone. The kind of cold that the desert produces after dark, a cold that bites differently than other cold, a cold with teeth, was making the journey miserable. And then, in the distance, he saw a fire. A small campfire, burning in the middle of the empty desert. No settlement nearby, no road, no reason for anyone to be there. But fire means warmth. Fire means safety. And after hours of freezing darkness, the merchant walked toward it. Sitting by the fire was a woman, extraordinarily beautiful, alone, in the middle of the desert at night. She looked up as he approached and smiled, the smile of someone who had been waiting for company. She invited him to sit, to warm himself. She was, she said, a traveler who had lost her way. They talked. And as they talked, as the fire crackled and the warmth spread into his cold bones, the merchant felt himself relax for the first time in hours. The fear of the desert night loosened its grip. And then he looked down. From beneath the hem of her robes, extending into the sand, were 2 feet. But not the feet of a woman. They were the cloven, hair-covered hooves of a donkey. She had not noticed him look. She was still talking, still smiling, still perfectly, impossibly beautiful above the robes. But the feet did not match. Because the ghoul can change every part of its form except the feet. Some ancient flaw in their shape-shifting, some limitation of the fire they are made of, means the animal hooves always remain, always betray them. The merchant stood up slowly, calmly, said he needed to check on his camel, walked away at a normal pace, and then ran. Ran until his lungs burned and his legs gave out, until the fire was a tiny, distant pinprick of orange in the black desert behind him. He left his camel, his supplies, everything he owned, and he considered it the best trade he ever made. There is a female variant of the ghoul, known in ancient texts as the Sila, the seductress. In Western mythology, you know her as the succubus, the siren, the beautiful stranger on a lonely road whose eyes are slightly too bright, whose smile is slightly too perfect, who appears in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. In ancient Eastern tradition, the warning is this: if you are alone on a desolate road at night and you see a strikingly beautiful stranger, alone, distressed, asking for your help, look at their feet before you stop. Just look at their feet. Everything up to this point, the Jann, the Amir, the Qareen, the Ghoul, has been building toward this. Because now we enter a different league entirely. The Ifrit. If the Amir is a ghost story, and the Qareen is a psychological thriller, the Ifrit is a war. These are the subterranean royalty of the Jinn world, the aristocracy of smokeless fire, ancient, immensely powerful, and possessed of a malevolence so pure and so calculated that human language genuinely struggles to contain it. The Ifrit live beneath the earth, in caverns, in ancient ruins, in the subterranean spaces of the world that human civilization has never reached. They are bound to specific locations with the intensity of a territorial claim that makes the Jann look casual by comparison. In ancient times, powerful kings and sorcerers knew this, and they used it. When a king buried treasure, real treasure, the kind measured in gold and jewels and priceless artifacts, he did not simply hide it. He bound an Ifrit to it. Through specific, ancient rituals that the texts describe in careful, frightening detail, the Ifrit was tethered to the hoard, given one instruction above all others: guard it, forever. And the Ifrit, with its particular brand of immortal patience, does exactly that. There are abandoned fortresses in Oman, in Yemen, in the ancient corners of the Arabian Peninsula where civilizations rose and fell over thousands of years. Places that the local people who have lived in these regions for centuries, whose grandparents' grandparents played in these ruins as children,
will not enter, not for money, not for any reason, because people have gone into those places and come back wrong. Not physically harmed, necessarily, not always. The Ifrit is far too sophisticated for brute force. Instead, people emerge from these places having experienced what can only be described as a complete dissolution of reality. Walls that were not there before, passages that lead in circles, rooms that should not exist given the architecture, sounds that cannot be localized, voices, screaming, laughter that seem to come from inside the stone itself, and a crushing, absolute, bone-level certainty that something vast and ancient and beyond furious knows you are there. The Ifrit do not kill quickly. Ancient accounts are consistent on this point with a specificity that is more frightening than any ghost story. The Ifrit's method is madness. It does not end you, it unravels you. Reality by reality, certainty by certainty, it dismantles your sense of what is real until your own mind becomes the enemy. Until you cannot tell what you are seeing, what you are imagining, what happened 10 minutes ago, and what happened 10 years ago. And when the unraveling is complete, when there is nothing left of the rational mind that walked into its territory, then, and only then, does the Ifrit let your body follow. This is why, this is the reason, that even professional archaeologists, scientists with PhDs and decades of rational, empirical training have walked to the entrance of certain ancient sites in these regions and turned around. Not because of superstition, because of something they felt at the threshold that their training gave them no language to describe.
You know the merit. You just know it by a different name. The genie of Western popular culture, the entity in the lamp, the wish granter, the magical servant, is a merit. Or rather, it is a catastrophically sanitized, Disney-fied version of what a merit actually is. The real merit is a leviathan. The merit are the largest jinn, the most physically powerful, the oldest after the Jann, and in certain texts, considered the most dangerous of all the seven, not because of aggression, but because of intelligence. They live in deep water, in oceans, in vast underground lakes, in the crushing dark depths where no sunlight has ever reached and no human technology has yet to explore. They have been there since before the continents separated, since before the oceans took their current shapes. And yes, the ancient legends are true. A merid can grant wishes. They have the power to alter physical reality on a scale that makes every other jinn look like an apprentice. Wealth, power, influence, outcomes that should be impossible becoming suddenly inexplicably real. But here is what the children's movie never tells you. Nothing is free. And the merid, having existed for longer than human civilization itself, has developed an extremely sophisticated understanding of what human beings truly value. When a merid grants a wish, it does not ask for gold. It does not want your possessions. The price of a merid's gift is measured in something far more precious. The ancient texts say it plainly. Deal with a merid, and what it takes from you will be the thing you love most in the world. The merchant who wished for wealth found it, and found 3 years later that everyone he had ever loved was gone. Not dead, necessarily, just gone. Removed from his life by the 1,000 small turning points that alter the course of human relationships, each one feeling like a coincidence, none of them being one. The merid are not evil in the way that word is usually used. They are simply operating by a different set of rules. Rules that were ancient when humanity was still learning to make fire. And those rules say that everything has a price, and the merid will always, always collect. The seventh and final classification, and in some ways, the most terrifying of all. Not because of raw power, not because of ancient malevolence, but because of perfection. The Sila. The Sila are female Jinn, the feminine archetype of the smokeless fire world, and their particular gift, refined over thousands of years of practice, is the one that most directly exploits the specific weaknesses of the human brain. They are perfect. Not just beautiful, not just convincing, perfect. The Sila can construct a human appearance and human behavior so flawless, so precisely calibrated to what its specific target finds most attractive and most trustworthy, that no human instinct can detect the deception. No cold feeling, no raised hair on the back of the neck, no subconscious alarm bell. Just a feeling of warmth, of connection, of finding, miraculously, exactly the right person in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. The Sila are documented throughout ancient Eastern literature as the origin of a very specific type of disappearance. Travelers, always alone, always at night, always in isolated locations, who encounter a woman in distress, who stop to help, who follow her a short distance into the trees or down a path or toward a light in the distance, and are never seen again. In modern parlance, there is a phrase for this. The place where a person was last seen is always the place where they made a choice to stop, to follow, to trust. The Sila does not force, it does not threaten, it does not chase. It simply offers something that looks, in every way that a human being can perceive, exactly like safety. And when you are alone and tired, and the night is dark and long and full of things you cannot name, safety is the most dangerous thing in the world. The ancient warning is precise. It has been passed down in these cultures for thousands of years with an urgency that suggests it was not written as folklore. If you are alone on the desolate road at night, and a beautiful stranger appears, distressed, asking for help, in exactly the right way at exactly the right moment, do not stop. Drive past, walk past, keep moving. And do not, under any circumstances, look at her feet. Seven kings of smokeless fire. The Jann in the wild, desolate spaces of the world. The Amir in the walls of the house you are sitting in right now. The Qareen tethered to your soul from the moment you were born. The Ghoul at the borders between life and death. The Ifrit in the deep underground, guarding things that were meant to stay buried. The Marid in the crushing dark of the deep ocean, making bargains that always collect. And the Sila, perfect, patient, waiting at the edge of the light. I want to ask you 3 questions before we end tonight, and I want you to answer them honestly, not out loud, but in the private, quiet space of your own mind. Have your pets, your dog, your cat, ever stared at an empty corner of the ceiling with an intensity that no rational explanation can account for? Growling at nothing, refusing to look away, tracking something that moves through a space where nothing is moving? Have you ever entered a perfectly clean, recently aired room and smelled, for just a moment, just 2 or 3 seconds, the unmistakable smell of something rotting? And then it was gone, as completely and suddenly as it arrived. Have you ever woken in the absolute dead of night, completely alert, and been unable to move? Not sleepy, not confused, fully, horribly awake, and yet completely paralyzed, with the specific, overwhelming sensation of a weight pressing down on your chest, and the absolute, unshakable certainty that you are not alone in the room? Science has a name for that last one. Sleep paralysis, it says. A temporary neurological event, a glitch in the waking process. But the ancient texts, written by people across a dozen different cultures on multiple continents, thousands of years before any of them could have compared notes, describe that exact experience, in exact detail. And they do not call it a neurological event. They call it a visitation. I am not here to tell you what to believe. I am here on MilesWithDreamss to take you to places, physical and otherwise, that most people never visit, to walk you through the edges of what is known and what is merely assumed. And what I know, after everything we have covered tonight, is this. Every single culture that has ever existed, every civilization that has ever risen and fallen on this planet, every ancient text ever written from every corner of the globe, in every language humanity has ever spoken, they all agree on one thing. You are not alone. You never have been. If you made it to the end of this hour, if you sat through all 7 kings of smokeless fire, I want to know. Leave a comment below. Tell me the strangest, most inexplicable thing that has ever happened in your home. The thing you have never told anyone because you knew they would not believe you. Tell me. And if you are new here, welcome to MilesWithDreamss. This is what we do. We walk into the dark together. Subscribe, turn on notifications, because where we are going next, you will not want to arrive late. Until next time, whatever you do tonight, don't look behind you.